Welcome to User Experience Design, Making a Research Plan. The objective for this video is to help students to be able to take company goals and rewrite and prioritize them as research questions. There's no point in conducting discovery research if you don't have a way to connect it back to the priorities and objectives of your company or client. Using some of the discovery tools we have discussed in this course, such as stakeholder interviews and UX workshops, you can uncover company goals and issues. Once you understand the goals, you can begin to craft a research plan by rewriting the goals as questions, which then become the basis of your plan. One effective way of making a research plan is to follow a three-step formula to first, collect the goals and issues of concern held by your stakeholders, to second, prioritize those goals and issues so that you know the most important things to focus on. Take 5 minutes to review some of your notes from your stakeholder interviews. What do you recall about stakeholder and user interviews? And what were some of the issues and goals that emerged from the discussion that you had with a stakeholder? The goals of the company are not always just to make the user's ability to use the product more efficient and more pleasant. Although that should be a priority, it cannot be emphasized at the expense of other business concerns like brand recognition, advertising, customer support, etc. User experience designers tend to focus specifically on the user's needs and how that experience can be better for them. But all of these things, all aspects and parts of an organization are part of that user experience, and so we need to definitely consider all of those as we prioritize our research. You can gather all stakeholders in a group meeting, or you can reach out to them individually and conduct stakeholder interviews. A meeting could be more efficient for the researcher, but can sometimes not be sufficient for discovering all the issues of concern. When you gather these stakeholders together or perform the interviews, there are 3 questions that Mike Kuniowski suggests stakeholders could answer to help you get the information you need to build out your research plan. The first is, in terms of what you do on a day-to-day basis, what are the goals of the product? The second question, are there ways that it's not meeting those goals? And if so, what are they? And third, are there questions you want to have answered about it? If so, what are those? By asking these questions, stakeholders will give you the type of information you need in order to start building out the research plan. User experience researchers would benefit at this point from also getting the perspective of the user. Even though a formal research plan is not in place, this helps orient the research process toward the user at the very beginning. It can also raise issues to the surface that the stakeholders were not aware of. Once you have collected your data, you can organize it by listing each stakeholder along with the issues that they raised when you had their meeting with them. In this image, you can see a table where we've put the person we talked to, the stakeholder, in the left column, and then their goals and questions on the right. The next step, once you have your list, is to prioritize those goals. One way to prioritize them is by giving each question or issue that's been raised a rating on both importance and severity. For importance, the scale might be a 5 is a must-have, and the 1 is a nice-to-have but not essential. For severity, a 5 could be a very bad problem, one that's affecting profitability, whereas 1 is just an annoying thing, or it might be a nice-to-know type of question. To prioritize the goals, you make a list of the issues raised in your meetings, rate each one on those scales of importance and severity, and then you multiply the importance score by the severity score to get a priority calculation. In this example, we have the increased revenue by 30% by end of year. We've given it an importance of 3 and a severity of 2. The priority then becomes a score of 6 by multiplying the 3 and the 2. Whereas on the bottom we have, why aren't new users staying? And we have an importance scale of 5 and severity scale of 5. Presumably that scale is because if we don't have users staying, then we can't engage them with our product and we won't be able to make sales and thus become profitable. So with that level of severity and importance, we multiply those together, it's a 25. Once you have the priority scored, you can order the table by the value of the priority column, and now you have an ordered list of the most important issues. The next step you take is to rewrite all of those issues as questions. An example, we can take this broader question of why aren't new users staying, and we can turn it into specific questions that might be better for a research project. For example, what is the average time on page for new users? What page do most new users abandon? How quickly do new users abandon? What difference can we discern between activities of new users who don't return and new users who do return? And what job are we failing to solve for new users? Some of these questions become easily used to create a study that can answer that question. For those issues down on the lower end of the priority scale, for example, this issue of increased revenue by 30% by end of year, this had a lower score in its priority. And so because it's so low, we might not even take the time to try to write questions to find out answers for this, because there will be plenty for us to do dealing with the higher priority items. Even though you're eliminating some of the lower priority items, you will likely end up with a large batch of research questions which can't all be answered in a single research project. But this prioritized list of questions will guide how you schedule and structure your research plan. Here are a few tips from Mike Kuniowski. First, never go into a research project to prove a point, and never create goals that seek to justify a position or reinforce a perspective. The process should aim to uncover what people really want and how they really are, not whether an opinion, whether yours or a stakeholder's, is correct. Learn the product thoroughly. Research goals can be framed more precisely if you can understand how the software currently works. Do what you can to become a user. Read the documentation, take a training course, and talk with tech support. A third tip is to be prepared to deal with fundamental questions about the product. If a question comes up during research, even if it's a question like, should we be in this business at all? Then there should be a way to deal with it and create research that will answer the question, or at least escalate it to a senior stakeholder who can address it. I want you to consider the following list of issues that's on the next screen. Take 10 minutes to write additional research questions based on each of the issues on that page. Expand any broader questions to get more specific questions. This is a way to practice what we've just talked about. On this table, the stakeholder is listed in the left-hand column, and their goals and questions are listed in the right-hand side. Take each of these goals or questions and write additional questions that could be used in a research project. We have discussed how to start generating a list of prioritized questions for a research plan by starting with stakeholder and user input about goals and issues, and converting them into questions.